Hello and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton, and welcome back to the Toffee Blues podcast. I'm joined once again by Harry. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. The sky is blue, and that always makes life a lot better, doesn't it? So yeah, I'm glad to be back as well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, like I said, I think the sky is blue in a literal and
Yeah,
metaphorical sense. I'd say at the moment. To be fair, you know, it's rare that I think a lot of the stuff we're going to be discussing today is mostly very positive around the club, both on and off the pitch, really. Um, and yeah, I guess that's the best place to start, really. There's been quite it's been quite an eventful last few days. In terms of the club in the present and looking forward in the future. So I guess the Bramley Moor Test event is probably no better place to start. And an enormous day in the club's history, really, the first time fans ever entered what's going to be our new home going
yeah.
forward. Were you there?
I was not, as I'm sure hundreds and thousands of Evertonians were not as well. But no, I was not one of the lucky 10,000 to be in attendance. And sadly, I'm far too old to be playing for our under 18s. So yeah, it was not for me this week.
Yeah, I say I consider myself very lucky that I was one of the 10,000 who was able to get a ticket and was able to be in there for the first time. But I guess that means that we've got a little bit of a blend here. You got
Yeah.
I've experienced it. You quite haven't yet, but I mean, from Monday night, I'm sure you were all over social media. Getting the photos coming in and I think even. I'd imagine for even for someone who wasn't there, that the excitement must be even more heightened now since
Yeah.
Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I did a video for the Toffee Blues when the day that David Moyes was confirmed as manager, and in my infinite wisdom, because I was in Liverpool at the time, decided to record it walking alongside the stadium with the gates still firmly locked and not allowing anybody in there and trying to sneak little glimpses without security catching me while we were filming that video. And just being around it and then seeing it alive, it kind of felt it's a very good metaphor, I think, for the club in general, this sort of sleeping giant that's just sitting in the heart of the city right now. And then the fact that the gates were opened a little bit like a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of scenario, like the gates swung open, everyone flocked in, and yeah, you're right, I wasn't there. But I had it on YouTube and I was liking everything that came through on X because it was a plenty. And I think yourself and the other 9,999 that were there did a fantastic job in sharing that experience, the good and the not so good, with everybody that wasn't there. But I think the overwhelming feeling, and you can tell me differently if you felt different, but the overwhelming feeling very much felt like we're almost there, kind of 98% of the way there for this being a home that we're all going to be very happy with.
Yeah, I think the main feeling for me is it's still going to take a lot of getting used to.
Hmm.
I think the best way I can describe it is it felt like going to Wembley or
Yeah.
going to the Etihad or the Emirates, because these modern stadiums they just feel like a world away from Goodison because of course they are. You're talking like over 100 years in different architecture and things like that. It's a completely different beast. And being on the concourses like that are just enormous now compared to the kind
Yeah.
of cramped conditions at Goodison. I was in the lower tier, so I didn't get to experience the long bar that you get in the upper tier. But regardless, it just felt completely different. And once you're in there in your seat, I was with my cousin who sits in row R in the Gladys Street lower, so right behind the goal. And I think we were at an equivalent like numbers back. I think we were like in like row 15 or something like that. And the
Yeah.
difference in view is just ridiculous. That this description they've been talking about for years is spot on, and you only really get it once you're in there. You feel like you're on top of the pitch. You feel so much closer and heightened. Every single seat will have an amazing view. Every single one in the whole ground. It's ridiculous, and it feels. it just feels completely different, and it's gonna really take some getting used to. Like this is our home. I say it's like when you get to go to Wembley every now and then to watch your team play. It feels like, a day of luxury. We're gonna have that
Yeah.
every week now. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's pretty mind blowing, really. Like you say, once you're in there and once you actually see. And I would like to say, like the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory metaphor, as you say, it just feels ridiculous. I couldn't quite believe like this is where we're going to be playing our football now every week. So yeah, that feeling
It does seem
definitely
to
came
get
across.
Yeah, and it does seem to all be getting a lot more real now, right? Like I know obviously what we're six home games away, one of them this weekend that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but like 6 games left at Goodison. Obviously now the first test event has happened, and I mentioned there like the good and the bad. I mean, it sounds like you had a cracking experience, and I think there were probably like overwhelming, as I say, 98%. I felt that it was very in favor of this is positive. This is a home that with some fine tuning we're going to be very happy with. I think there were a couple of things just from where I was sort of sitting at home looking at this on social media. Now I know the travel logistics and the getting to the stadium is something that not so much irritation towards the club, but towards the local council by the sound of it. And we're not a Liverpool City Council podcast, so we don't necessarily have to dwell on this too long. And also, I think the overall kind of like the lick of paint argument. There was this thing about the grey concrete sort of barrier running around the edge of the stadium and what they're going to do with that but as I say, fine tuning lick of paint. But did you feel that was there much conversation going on in the stadium about that with regards to like, oh, it was a nightmare to get here, or how are 50,000 going to do this on a match day? Like, what was the overwhelming sort of conversation like in the stadium?
Um, Yeah, I think it wasn't too much of an issue for us. We got there pretty early, and we found parking. On one of those things where you pay a bit of money to park on someone's drive, basically, and make the walk
Yeah,
down.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously, it's obviously only 10,000, and there was still quite a bit of difficulty. Obviously, you've got to times that by
yeah,
five once once it's obviously fully open and we're playing proper games in it, of course. Um, yeah, I think the images from the train stations and that and sand hills and all that, it's definitely concerning and definitely something that I think probably needs to be addressed. You think about once away fans are in there as well, it
yeah,
needs to be properly regulated, or it's just asking for trouble, really, isn't it? Um,
for sure.
yeah, and similarly as well, I completely agree about the liquor pain. As you say, it's one of them where like it feels almost ready, but it doesn't feel. I guess it doesn't feel alive yet, if you know what I mean. I think it's one of
Yeah,
them that I think the 1878's role is going to become even more important now.
for
I
sure.
think they've got a lot of responsibility now to once we get in there, they've got to make it they've got to make it feel like ours. It needs more blue, absolutely,
Yeah.
um, and it needs more blue around the whole stadium. Like I said, we
Mm.
were just obviously concentrated in the south stand, um, and my shoes were still covered in paint, so it's clear that it is still very fresh. And it's still
Yeah.
very painted concrete that not many people will have walked over yet. So, I'd say it still feels all very fresh, and
Mm.
it probably still needs a bit more time to settle and become ours again. But as you say, I think all the foundations are there now, and it's not quite ready to host like proper games yet. But it's clear that by August it'll be more than ready. And once you get the flags in there and things like that, I think it will look amazing. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's all very
There's
exciting.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, right? I think we should stress this because I think we have a tendency, both as like Brits and as Evertonians, to just sort of always see that not every cloud has a silver lining, but every blue sky has a grey cloud sometimes. And I think we've got to remember that was a test event. And the fact that it went as well as it did, I think, and the whole point of it was to identify where the problems and improvements and get that feedback from the people that were there, and also get that feedback from the people that saw it from afar. So there is time to correct these things. I think in terms of like recent history, you would hope that Everton would be more aligned to how Tottenham's experience has been with their new stadium, where I don't remember hearing or seeing anything majorly critical from Spurs fans when they moved into that new stadium. But if you look at the other side of that rivalry and West Ham when they moved into the London stadium, we know that that took a couple of years of transition, and they had a very similar move from quite an intimate ground in the bowling ground to what is now the London Stadium where they were, like, or where they play their football now. So I think we've got to learn from the other clubs in the UK that have done this. And as I say, I think we would all be hoping for more of a Spurs model than a West Ham model. And I do wonder, here's my grey cloud on the blue sunny day, but my grey cloud would be I do wonder how much of this isn't going to get sped up until we have a new board in place and until these appointments are made by the Friedkin Group. I think we talked on the last podcast about this desire to have a little bit more business acumen. And I think there's such a big part of this that lends itself to beyond a stadium project leader. Like, we need to have this unity from a board who it feels like is still a little way away from coming into place. So hopefully the Friedkins get that sorted, and hopefully they already have a plan of how we make that transition super smooth, because I don't want to be the grey cloud. I want this to be super sunny as we leave Goodison. We want that emotion of leaving Goodison to be completely around the emotion of leaving Goodison. We don't want any kind of emotion to be around nervousness about moving to the new place. We want that place to feel, like you said, a great, like, luxurious, like it's a luxurious new home that we have long since wanted. And for that to happen, we've just got to hope that, like, that transition plan is there and sorted and ready to go. And I think there's two more test events before. Yeah, so great. There's time to sort it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just I think just final thoughts on this as well. You said about obviously the difference between the Spurs and the West Ham project. Spurs, it was clear, they took on fan feedback, they built it on the same site, there's
Yeah.
no like relocation or anything like that. And as you say, it seemed about as smooth as a transition as you could have hoped for. And as you say, in complete contrast to West Ham, where, they just took over the Olympic Stadium, did it up a little bit, and then there you go, we'll play football in that now. When West Ham fans didn't really want to leave in the first place. Whereas I think with us, I think the main concern we had about moving in was that it couldn't be, this word that's been thrown around so much, soulless. And I can
Yeah.
I can guarantee you now from being in there that that place, if the fans will it, will be able to generate an amazing atmosphere. Absolutely, like, absolutely. I could already tell just from 10,000, watching a friendly game. Every now and then, once we got to the end and we got a goal back, and everyone was kind of willing the lads on to get an equaliser right late on, and rescue a little bit of pride. Even just from that, I could tell the noise in this place could be amazing. It genuinely could,
Yeah.
because of how it's been built and how contained it all feels. So, as you say, I think we feel a little bit spoiled, I think, and so with that, everyone wanted everything to be perfect and running absolutely
Yeah.
smoothly, and that's not. I don't think that was feasible, that everything was going to go off without a hitch, especially at this point in the process. But it's absolutely, I think, an improvement on Goodison. And if you look, like, obviously we have so much love for Goodison, but if you look at Goodison, it's not the most comfortable match experience possible, is it? In the
No.
cramped streets, the concourses where you have to like struggle through to get a beer and all of that, and you're packed tightly in the seats. But if you want to have that intimate atmosphere, you're not going to be miles away from each other. You're not going to have like loads of leg room and things like that. And
Yeah.
like, people were complaining a bit about the lower stand and the safe standing not having quite as much room as you want, but you're standing up. That's the whole point. You're not meant to be comfortable
Yeah.
sitting down. So yeah, I think I think it's brilliant, and I think, as I say, I still think it'll take some getting used to, but after a while it'll feel like home, and it will rightly be considered one of the best grounds in the country. So yeah, like I say, I'm all feeling positive about it at the moment, and I think, as if we're gonna try and smoothly segue into more football chat, I think it was helped by just how good everyone's feeling about the club at the moment on the pitch as well. Of course, obviously it was on
Yeah.
the Monday, coming off the back of Saturday's win. Not that, with the derby still fresh in everyone's mind as well, and the euphoria from that. So Yeah, I guess now, looking ahead to the looking onto the football now side of things, we haven't recorded a podcast since the derby.
Yeah,
I don't think we need any excuse to discuss that again. So,
go back on that one.
yeah, so yeah, what were your thoughts after that game?
I'll tell you something now. I think there is something to be said, and maybe this is a mentality thing that we need to shift as a club as we grow, but there is something to be said about a last minute equalizer versus a last minute winner. And especially in that context, I remember the Jagielka goal at Anfield. So it's absolutely, I think I wrote an article about this for the Toffee Blues a long time ago, that is probably my favorite ever Everton goal, just for the context, the way it's hit, how it looks, the rewatchability of it. I think Tarkovsky's now would come very close to probably leveling that, if not kind of overtaking it. And I think the game as a whole, what was so delightful about that was the least that we deserved from that game. And I'm sure there are Reds podcasts that are saying the complete opposite of this, and such is football rivalry. But I felt that is the most competitive in a derby we have been in many years. And even last season when we beat them at Goodison as well, like it was a Dyche performance where we ground it out. They were really, Liverpool were in a really bad way that time in the season last season. But if you're talking like a prime Liverpool side, which where they are in the table suggests that's what they are, it was such a good point and such a well-deserved point. And I think you could just, I mean, so many people have said, right, such a fitting send-off for like the last derby at Goodison. And I think even if you took that out of it, just a standalone derby, no matter where it's played, like what a great performance. And this is just so reminiscent of how I remember David Moyes' Everton. Like down to the bare bones, like how many academy players on the bench over the last few games, like really limited senior football options, and yet grinding it out, playing decent enough football, like fighting for the shirt, fighting for your teammates. Like that was all what made David Moyes' Everton so great. That's what made his tenure so long, and what made him such a sought after manager 11 years ago. You know, Man United were not the first club that were after him. So I think overall, yeah, wow. Very happy to keep talking about it with you, Alex, because it's we could do a whole podcast on it still, but it was a draw that felt very much like a win, and it felt very much like what we've come to now expect from this new version of David Moyes' Everton.
Mm. Yeah, you've echoed so many sentiments there that I completely agree with, but I'm gonna start with one that I actually want to pick a few holes in, and
Okay,
and that is about the David Moyes factor. And I think something that really needs to be considered is that this Liverpool team right now is probably better than any Liverpool team during Moyes' first reign, the whole 11 years. I don't think
yeah,
any team they had under Benitez or whoever was better than the Liverpool team that they have now. And in contrast, I don't think there's many Everton teams that Moyes had that were worse than this one. And I think so.
fair enough.
I think the difference in quality between the two sides in the game we played last week is further apart than anything Moyes experienced. And yet, I remember far too many derbies back in that time where we for want of a better phrase, like shat the bed a little bit, basically.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
even towards the end when we were finishing above them in the last two seasons in Moyes, even in those games, I still remember that semi-final. And I know it's a semi-final, it's a little bit of a different contrast, but we were the better team that day. And as soon as Distan did that back pass and Suarez equalised, every Everton fan in that ground knew that we were going to lose that game. And as you say, it's a mentality thing. And yet,
yeah,
last week, as I say, with the difference in quality, we rocked up to Goodison Park for the last ever game. I don't know if the event of like this, of things played into that a little bit, but we went there with absolutely no fear against a team that are probably going to win the league. And
yeah,
and as you say, I think the minimum we deserve is a draw. And I genuinely, in all my euphoria walking out of there, there was still a small part of me thinking that should have been a winner. And if that was a winner,
yeah.
it was an amazing feeling as it was. If that was the winner in the last ever derby, I'm not sure the ground would have survived it. I think it might. I think it might have genuinely fallen down, and there would be no 6 games left. That would have been it. But all jokes aside, I genuinely think that was the minimum we deserved. I think especially in the second half, I thought we
Yeah,
battered them, and I also think that in the first reign, that Everton team, even if they were putting in a performance like that, I think that second goal, the Salah goal that put Liverpool ahead when all the momentum was on our side, would have absolutely killed us. And it
yeah,
did for a while. I think the crowd was very deflated. I think even for a while the players were pretty deflated, but we still managed to pick ourselves back up. And we never do this. It's always Liverpool who
no,
score the last minute goals in derbies. It was so nice to get one of our own. Yeah, you're probably going back to that Jagielka one all those years ago. Last time we had anything like that in a derby. Um, and as you say, it was just such a great feeling. And I'll tell you what as well, sitting in that ground. I could hear when the Liverpool fans started doing they did what was it we won the league at Goodison Park and all that,
yeah, yeah,
and then they started singing "You'll Never Walk Alone," and it got it got the crowd up a little bit, like booing it and all that. And I just had the feeling when they started singing that it was really odd. I just had the feeling we're going to equalise it. It was really odd, and in a derby as well. I never have feelings like that. I always think the
yeah.
worst,
Rightly
but
so. Yeah,
but yeah, but then I was just like, we're going to equalise. We're going to have at least one more chance, really good chance, and we're going to score. And I could tell it was going to happen as soon as Mikalenko got the cross in. I was like, it's going to let it bounce. Okay, it's going to bounce, right? And then someone hits it in, and then Sarkowski, hits the best shot he's ever hit in his life, and it just felt almost like it was meant to happen with the last
yeah.
derby. And yeah, as you say, just what an amazing feeling. Really bats against the wall. And yet I thought we really, really took it to them, and as you say, ground out a point that was the least we deserved. And and yeah, just what an amazing feeling really is all I can is all I can describe it as. And as you say, the perfect send off in a way. Something that
Yeah.
so few derbies that have been on our side and that side of things, and yet we managed to get the equaliser.
I just think there's something to be said on this, by the way, about there's been so much made, hasn't there? I've heard podcasts, I've heard pundits, I've seen so much on social media about Everton celebrating a draw like it was a win. And I just think my 2 pence on this is if you've I saw a fantastic bit by the way from Tony Bellew on a clip from A League of Their Own where he said about being an Evertonian is character building. And if people haven't seen this clip yet, very funny, even funnier because Sean Dyche is on the panel on the opposite team. But it is character building. We have all been through a lot, and the one thing that you can never accuse an Evertonian 40 years and under of being is a glory hunter. So if you support Everton, you're an Evertonian just because you've had to go through a lot, right? And we're all bonded by trauma. So my 2 pence on this is we didn't celebrate that draw like it was a win. I think that was a very much a cathartic release of where have we been as a club for the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, like circling the drain, plucky, scrappy, trying to stay up under different managers, different kind of like slowly losing identity. This Frankenstein's monster of a squad, which was sort of bought over the from Martinez onwards, players that still exist from those managers, and really like just a release of like, wow, like I think that point was sort of this we're not looking over our shoulder anymore at the teams behind us. We are very much just looking at like how high can Moyes get us in this impossible situation he was put in. And I don't think it was so much celebrating anything like it was more than what it was. I think it's just this release of, the other lot have had a lot to celebrate in the last 11 years. We have not, and they can bring their 30 balloons and their banners that they couldn't unravel and get the right way up. Hilarious. But we've just got something there that like we've got our club back. And I know this is one of the things we were going to talk about today was like the general atmosphere, regardless of the results, like around the club. And we've got our club back. It's a phenomenal thing what he has done in such a short space of time. We're talking just over 2 months, right? That he's been back. If that even, sorry, just over a month maybe. And like what he's been able to do, and for that to culminate in a never say die performance against your fiercest rivals who sit top of the league, have blown away far better sides this season, by the way, in the league as well. And for them to really struggle and get pegged back by a very kind of scrappy, determined Everton performance, it's the least the fans deserve for what we've all gone through the last few years. And yeah, I just think that's my opinion on that in general is like there should be no celebration, please. Like if you can celebrate all holding hands a 2-2 draw against West Brom, Liverpool, then you can allow us and afford us celebrating a fantastic goal in our last derby at Goodison.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think if you're really having an issue with fans celebrating something like that, you haven't been to enough games because
No,
if you're in that stadium, you get it. You absolutely get that feeling, and yeah, that's all I can really say on it. Absolutely, and yeah, like you say, I think I completely agree as well about the Moyes factor and just how. Like I said, the simplest change is that he's just got us looking forward to watching Everton again, which
yeah,
just wasn't the case for so long and under Deitch, even when we were on the right side of things and getting good results and having good periods of form, there just wasn't this enjoyment like there is now, and this feeling that this feeling of belief that he's given to the fans and to the players,
yeah,
that no matter what we're in with a shout here. And like I say, it's kind of what I was touching on before about. I do genuinely believe this is a different Moyes to the one we had at Everton as well. Now I think he's more grizzled. I think he's a little. I think he's less cautious, and I think he's a bit more now like just let's just have a go. Let's just have a go.
yeah,
I do genuinely believe even an Everton side containing the likes of Pienaar, Cahill, Arteta, all of them would have struggled on last week against Liverpool. Um, and with all these injuries as well, all of these factors, that second half in particular was really impressive. And we were missing our best player, and Dye went off injured in the first half. That was
yeah,
another blow that we just didn't let affect us. So that's I thought it was such a positive performance all round, and I think it really carried into Palace on the weekend as
yeah,
well.
absolutely.
And with the squad even more, like Decore gone as well, knowing Die, as you say, just a bunch of kids on the bench basically, with Ashley Young looking after them all, um,
Yeah,
and and yet. And whereas Palace won completely the opposite end of the spectrum, weren't they? They had Eze and Wharton back on for the second half
yeah,
after timeout. The complete opposite end of things. And yet it's another away win in the book and another W in this run of fixtures that the Moyes is going
yeah,
on since his return. And yeah, just I we just seem like we always have a win in us now, which is the complete opposite to what it used to be, where you always think that no matter how well we're playing, we could easily end up losing this now. And
for
so
sure.
that feeling, as you say, it's just been completely turned on its head, and in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and just on the Palace game as well, there's such a that Palace game was a catalyst for me for the conversation that needs to be had around who is the most improved player under David Moyes, because there are a long list of contenders for me, Mikalenko being one of them, because I think and he gets dogs abuse from our fans a lot. I'll correct myself. He gets dogs abuse from a portion of our fans for some of the performances that he was putting in under Sean Dyche. And I think when Moyes took over, this idea that he now could cross the halfway line and looked a bit hesitant about putting a cross in or playing an early pass. You think you're trained and conditioned to play in a certain way, and some players it will take longer to overcome those kind of shackles that were placed on them. I think he's been phenomenal the last couple of games, down to the bare bones. We don't have really kind of cover in his position other than Ashley Young. And I think he is playing his part beautifully in that system. Obviously, Beto would be many people's easy option for that. And again, another great goal at the weekend, another improved performance. He is game on game, just looking how he looks as a footballer. When you look at Beto without watching a minute of him playing, he looks like a handful for defenders. He must clearly have a good finish. and like he's strong, he looks strong, and we've not really seen that for a lot of his time at Everton. But the last few weeks under Moyes, he's been a handful for defenders. He's got control of the ball. Things aren't rolling away from him, and he's composed. And for a guy his size to be composed in front of goal, every time he gets the ball to feet, he looks like he's gonna at least test a goalkeeper, which for a long part of Dyche's tenure, whoever was up front, we wasn't necessarily even getting fed, let alone getting the chance to put a ball on target. So the Palace game was great. Our away form, I think, goes under the radar a little bit. I think we've never historically been a side that thrives away from home, but the fact that we've got those back-to-back away wins under Moyes now. But you're absolutely right. Like, I don't think we fear opponents anymore. I think we go into every game. The fans have optimism and belief. I think that lifts so much pressure off the players. But Moyes' man management to just get some of these guys to realize they can play football, they can cross the halfway line, you can have a shot, and if it goes off target, that's not you sort of black spotted and out the club in the summer. Like, just the ability to have that kind of nurturing aspect of his game. And I don't always know if that was present during his first tenure. And I think he's possibly, you mentioned grizzled, which is a lovely word and a lovely representation of how any Everton manager looks at some stage in their tenure of the club. But he just looks like, despite being grizzled and more experienced, that he's got that kind of life experience to pass on to these players now and help them through a tough time. So great win at the weekend off the back of, lest we forget, like a defeat in the cup and then a very hard fought draw. So, when we were last on the pod, I predicted back to back wins, which didn't happen. But to go and get that win away from home, also again after being pegged back and we could have kind of capitulated, fallen apart, we didn't. Charlie Alcaraz as well, great signing, fantastic signing, great early signs from him, and really looking forward actually to seeing if he plays again at the weekend.
Hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Like I said, we said that if say things didn't quite go to plan against Bournemouth, that it might see the wheels fall off a little bit. And
Yeah,
and as you said, that's just not what's happened at all. We've picked ourselves back up, as you say, got a really good draw against Liverpool, that we fully deserved. And then with against all the odds, really, I picked up another win against Palace, as you say. I think you said about the players improving as well. I think you've got to give a mention to Jake O'Brien as well, who
yeah,
seemed completely frozen out of the team. Didn't Seemed like it was just a wasted signing, like money spent on a player that just wasn't ready at all, and maybe needed a loan next season or something once we had a few more options. And yet now he looks almost undroppable. I think I
yeah,
think I think he's fitted in absolutely seamlessly, and it looks like he's been playing in this team all season. Does really well for the winning goal. Like, again, one of those balls that it looks a bit hopeless, but he doesn't give up on, and manages to keep it alive. Um, and it's those small margins that, again, that a team full of confidence gets, and a team without confidence doesn't. That I don't think that type of goal would have happened a few months
no,
ago, in the final days of Deitch. And that I think that's really indicative of just how much the mentality has shifted. And as you mentioned there as well, of course, you say about Carlos Alcaraz, it was, I mean, I think better one man of the match, but he was probably the main talking point out of Palace, in his first start, a goal and an assist. But of course, going into Saturday's game, it creates a bit of an interesting question. Obviously, it's definitely a bit of a different game compared to the Palace one as well. But with
yeah.
Decore coming back into the side, who gets the nod? And it's mental that we now have competition for places, when it was basically just like,
Who'd
oh
have
God,
thought it?
yeah, like who doesn't play and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, who would you be picking?
Do you know what? If I was picking, I'd let Alcaraz stay in the team. I just think he's exciting. I think coming up against Man United this weekend, who are probably more fragile in confidence than we are, just based on where they're at in the table, the pressure their manager's under, the fact that he's sticking to a system that his players just can't play. So I think having someone exciting, vibrant in there could really mix things up. I think David Moyes, provided he's fully fit after a suspension, I think Doucouré will go back in. I think he will stick to what has got him this far. That was not a choice he had against Palace. So I think Doucouré goes back in. And I think Alcaraz is a fantastic option to bring off the bench. I don't think it'll be long before he is starting games. But yeah, I think he'll go with what's brought him this far, David Moyes on Saturday.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me because I think if you're looking at this game neutrally and like on a tactical basis, I think Doucouré coming into the side probably makes the more sense. It helps us,
Yeah.
deal with any midfield threat. It almost certainly, I think looking at them against Tottenham last week, I think we could bully them in midfield if we really want to on
Yeah.
Saturday. Um, but that aspect of things makes me think that mentality wise. I'd stick with Alcaraz because I think it's probably a bit more of an attack-minded option. I think
Mm.
uh it maybe doesn't provide quite as much midfield solidity. I know that was a little bit of a concern from people on Saturday that our midfield was maybe getting bypassed a little too easily, and the core not being in there almost certainly provides to that. But
Mm.
as you say, I think United really are there for the taking, and it's a weird one for me. I don't know how many people are going to agree with me saying this, but I want to beat United almost as much as I wanted to beat Liverpool last week. I think United we really owe
Yeah, oh,
a
massively
beating of
so.
them
Yeah.
because it's been even the last few years when. Their confidence is about as on the floor at the moment as it has been for a long time. But even in the last few years, it's been like this a lot. And yet, we always seem to be that team that gets their confidence up a little bit, and they somehow manage to batter us every time we play them. And I hope now with this newfound, fearlessness that we seem to have a little bit, and this feeling that that is carried over to the fans as well, that now we could probably beat anybody on our day. I think
Yeah.
I think the Liverpool performance probably proves that. I think we really owe United a tough game on Saturday afternoon, and I genuinely think almost like sticking with someone like Alcaraz and keeping his confidence high like adds to that feeling. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what he goes with. But
Yeah,
um
it will be.
yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I think for me, what's really interesting with this one at the weekend, I agree with you. Like we owe them, and we've had some fantastic wins against United over the years. When Moyes was in the dugout for us, and a couple when he was in the dugout for the other lot as well. But I do think that the one of Amarin's wins was the 4-0 against Everton. And that's the only thing that hovers over me is that you're right. They always seem to turn up and put in a performance against Everton. But this is a different Everton. And whilst it's the same players we've seen, these same players miraculously look completely different to how they did 2 months ago. So I would hope that we approach this in the same manner that we approach the Spurs game, like zero fear, know that they're there for the taking, really want to attack and press them and cause them problems, and then hopefully just have a little bit more defensive maturity than we did in that kind of second half against Spurs. So yeah, I think it's a game we're certainly up for. It's a game I don't think many fans have much fear over because, as we said earlier, like there's very few that we'd fear at the moment.
Mhm. So yeah, so we've got what you want to happen, and I'm now going to press you on what you think will happen.
Yeah, I mean it's the lunchtime game, isn't it? I'll go 2-1 Everton. I think I'm just you'd have to be very, very cynical to not back Everton at the moment on form. So yeah, 2-1. I think Beto gets another goal. I'll go Doucouré to get a goal, assuming he goes back into the side. And I think we'll come from a goal behind as well. They're all my bold predictions for the
Oh,
weekend.
oh, okay, that would be very interesting. Yeah, I think from sheer desire, I'll just say 2-0 and a 2-0 that should be more. I think is
Yeah.
what is the thing I'll go for. And I'll say as well, I one of the main things I want at the moment is Lindstrom to get a goal.
Yeah, same.
I
Yeah.
think his performances have been so good lately, and he's still plugging away, and it's just not happening for him. I'd love him to get a goal because I think it'll really help him kick on and put in some even more impressive performances. Right, well, I think that just wraps up all the football talk then. So I guess to just to round things off, we'll do the lineup quiz and I actually noticed before just before we started recording that you tweeted out about this game. So you
Oh man.
like I say, we're recording this on the 20th of February, so we've been 15 years to the day since this game. It seemed a good one to choose, and the pressure's on now because you've tweeted out about how much
Man,
this game meant
said I
to you,
remember
like
it.
when you were
Yeah,
there. So if you don't get all these players now, it's gonna look terrible. So yeah, the game we're doing is Everton 3, Manchester United 1 on the 20th of February 2010. So it's the 09-10 season. Um, this was vintage Moyes, one. Let's be honest. These are some of the
yeah.
names in this team are just essence of the original Moyes team. Yeah. Are you ready?
I'm ready. There's so much pressure on this now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do
So
it
yeah, so
though.
let's
Let's
say
do it.
you remember how it works in that you've got three lives. So if you say any player who is not in the starting lineup or on the bench, you lose a life and you have three
Yeah.
lives left. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, let's try and do this tactically. I mean, the good thing is with David Moyes that it was all very like predictable, right? Because as we
Yeah.
talked about earlier, it there wasn't a lot of options.
Yeah.
So Tim Howard was the goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Now I've got to think about our defenders here. So Bainesy would have been left back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Phil Neville would have been right
Phil
back.
Neville was right back. Yeah.
Go and watch the opening of that game again. Treat yourself today to Gary and Phil Neville stood in that tunnel like they've slept with each other's wives. Absolutely hilarious. Okay, centre backs. Jags would have played.
Jagielka was not in the team.
Oh, he was injured.
I have in my
Was
head
he
he was.
injured?
I think he
Yeah,
was still coming back from that long injury he had
that
that
awful injury.
that
Yeah,
rolled him out the final. So that's a life lost.
that's a life.
So
Okay, so it would have been Distan and Heitinger
this and
then.
Heitinger. Yep. So there you go.
Yeah,
That's the
okay.
defense done.
Nice. Defense is sorted. I'd have already lost all my lives when we did the Bournemouth one a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So, okay. Sahar played up front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's the striker because that would have been a lone strike. Or would it? Or we'll come back to that. But Sahar was up front. Um, Rodwell and Gosling came off the bench, I believe, because they both scored, but they didn't start. But who did start and scored the first goal was Billy Eletdinov. So
Yeah.
he would have played.
Okay. That's
Okay.
seven.
And then it's a question of was this I'm risking a life here, but I'm gonna say Stephen Pienaar.
Yep. Stephen Payne, was in. That's eight.
Okay, we got eight. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we got the three sort of midfield players now. So who would that have been? Osman would have played?
Osman. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Goodness me. Now the question is, was this sort of the Coleman in front of Neville season hybridy thing that was going on? I don't think it was. So Osman would have been there. Who else would have played in that midfield? Goodness me. Rodwell and Gosling, no, because like I said, I think they both came off the bench. Oh, Cahill, Tim Cahill would have played.
Tim Cahill was not in the team. He
He was not in the team.
must have been injured.
Ah,
I have no idea why, but not even on the bench. So no Cahill.
that's
And
two
that,
lives gone
yeah,
on stalwarts as well.
yeah.
Okay, this one as well could be risky because but I'm pretty sure he featured. I'm going to say Arteta would have played.
Arteta played. So
Okay.
there's one left to get, and
Oh
you've
my
got one
goodness.
life. So
Oh, we've got to gamble here because, as I say, I don't know whether this would have been a case of I'm so sure Neville was right back, so I don't think this is Coleman playing there. Fellaini. No,
Fellaini,
oh
no.
no.
Fellaini had just got that injury against Liverpool a
Oh
few weeks before,
man.
so he was
Yeah.
out long term and not on the bench. It's a tricky one, the last one, and the reason it's tricky is that he wasn't here very long, but he was brilliant.
Oh,
So that's your clue.
brilliant and not here very. I mean, lots of people. Man. No, go on, put me out of my misery.
It's possibly the best loan signing we've ever done. I'd gamble on
Oh,
that.
Landon Donovan.
Landon Donovan was in the team.
Oh,
It's such a tricky one in there because, like I say, Fellaini and Cahill not being in the squad
yeah.
is such a trip up, and I knew you'd get at least one of them, and it would trip you up a bit. Yeah, so that's so Landon Donovan completed the team, and then yeah, you've got Coleman was on the bench, Gosling and Rodwell, like you said, Joseph Yobo was still there,
Oh
James
wow,
Vaughan,
yeah.
and
Great.
Jakubu. And Carlo Nash was the backup goalkeeper, of course.
Big
So
a big love for Carlo Nash. I have a love. We should do a podcast one day on backup goalkeepers to Tim
yeah,
Howard because there were some fantastic names that floated
yeah,
around
there
during
were
that
there were
time.
to be fair, there were. So, but yeah, that was very close to be fair. That was a very good effort. 10 out of 11 is very good, and I knew I was sure that if you weren't going to get one, it was going to be Donovan. That was the
Yeah,
hardest one. So logically, you've done exactly what I thought you would do there. So but yeah, I'd take that on Saturday. Believe me, like proper.
yeah,
I was such a Moyes game that 3-1 against United when as I said that fearlessness we had back in those like second halves of the season after we'd been crap before and the second half of
yeah.
the season we just beat everybody like every
I
season for about 4 years. Uh,
you gotta love what was going on in that game as well. I mean, there were so many. I used to love it with Moyes because I felt like there was always like all these little sub stories that used to happen in games that weren't just 11v11. There was this whole thing. I think most of us knew that he was the chosen one to replace Sir Alex, and it was
mm,
all a case of when. And there was a lot of this. Like I always admired Phil Neville. I know he divides opinion amongst our fan base, but like the guy that took the pay cut to come and play regular football and became captain. And I really admired him for what he was doing. So, like the Neville brothers against each other. We used to have this thing, didn't we, with fantastic, like, ex-Man United players. So, like
mm.
Tim Howard and Louis Sahara also being in that side. And yeah, also like the bursting onto the scene of like Rodwell and Goslin as well, really. Like that was their sort of breakthrough season for both of them, to be fair. So great team, great game, and yeah, just Goodison at its best, right? I mean, if they do make lots of films and DVDs or whatever it is now, streaming platform content for Goodison in its final year, that game would feature for atmosphere and result for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, that's the thing about Moyes is I remember someone saying this quite recently. As you say, that was definitely true. By the way, everyone knew that chances are that Moyes was going to be the next Man United manager, and that was
Yeah.
that was going to be we were like him and Ken Wright were so close. He was never going to get sacked. Obviously Ferguson was never going to get sacked. It was all going to be a case of once Ferguson finally called it a day, we were going to lose Moyes. So yeah, those
Yeah.
and like you could tell the respect them two had for each other as well. I still remember when we beat them in the semi-final and everyone's running on the pitch and going mental. And Moyes just composes himself and goes over to Ferguson and shakes his hand and said, "Thank you for playing all your kids," basically. Um, so yeah, it had that aspect to it. Yeah, like I say, we do have a bit of a weird connection with Manchester United over the years, don't we? And as we say,
We
as we
do,
touched on,
yeah.
it's uh it's soured in recent years, doesn't it? And as I say, it's really manifested for me this weekend. I really want to get one over on them. So fingers crossed
Yeah.
we have one reminiscent of the game we've just discussed there. But yeah, I think that pretty much wraps everything up. So thank you very much for joining me, Harry. It's been another great podcast, another really
Yeah. Thanks
positive
for
one,
having
hasn't
me.
it?
Yeah.
Really
Yeah,
nice.
and long may this continue, by the way. Like, I'm absolutely not hiding from if we do lose a game coming on and talking to you, but I'm far more enjoying this way of living right now.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? So, yeah. So, like I say, please leave a like if you've enjoyed. Comment below, giving your thoughts ahead of the United game and all your thoughts of the excitement about the stadium and how much you're looking forward to all of that. And subscribe to the Toffee Blues channel for more Everton content. And we will see you in the next video. Up the Toffees.